Grand Rising family, another beautiful day. Give thanks and praises. Listen, effort is saying is true about this winter. It's gonna be very, very bad. So if you live in the north, any part of North Michigan, New York, Boston, the north part of America, prepare yourself. Prepare yourself because this winter will be very, very bad. So here's some clips of the winter that started already. It started already. So here's some clips to show you how bad it is, how bad it's supposed to get. Like I said, I'm just a messenger. I am just a messenger, folks. So check this out. Get your winter coats in gear, your boots, and your solar power generators because you never know it's going to get bad. Like I said, I'm just a messenger. Hang on, folks.
In just 24 hours, two major American highways more than 1,000 miles apart collapsed into chaos. High in the Colorado Rockies, a sudden whiteout swallowed Interstate 70, turning the canyon into a frozen trap. Nearly 50 vehicles slammed together in a violent chain reaction, SUVs spinning out semis, jackknifing, and drivers fighting desperately to stay in control on invisible black ice. But while Colorado was still counting its blessings after a miracle with no fatalities, another storm was already building across the Great Lakes. The next afternoon in Michigan, a ferocious lake-effect snow band slammed into Interstate 94. Visibility plunged to near zero. One car spun out, and within minutes, more than 40 vehicles were piled across the highway. This time, the outcome was far worse. Lives were changed forever. One driver never made it home. 2 states. 2 massive pileups. One unstoppable winter system sweeping across America. Tonight, we break down exactly how these disasters unfolded second by second. Why Colorado survived, and why Michigan didn't. And the hidden dangers millions of Americans will face as winter tightens its grip. This is the moment ordinary highways became disaster zones, and a warning for every driver on the road. Just before noon on a quiet Sunday, drivers winding through Glenwood Canyon had no warning of what was about to unfold. The towering rock walls that normally make this stretch of Interstate 70 one of the most scenic drives in Colorado suddenly became a trap as a fast-moving winter cell slammed into the Rockies. Within moments, the sky dimmed, winds picked up, and a wall of swirling snow dropped visibility to less than 500 feet. What looked like a normal wet roadway just minutes earlier transformed into a sheet of black ice, transparent, frictionless, and invisible to the human eye. At 11:28 a.m., disaster struck. A single vehicle lost traction near milepost 130, sliding sideways across the westbound lanes. The next car never saw it in time, nor did the one behind that. In seconds, the collisions multiplied, metal-crunching glass, exploding airbags detonating. When the snow settled for a brief moment, around 20 vehicles were twisted together in a mangled chain reaction stretching across the canyon floor. But the nightmare was only beginning. Just 15 minutes later, at 11:42 a.m., another catastrophe exploded in the eastbound lanes near milepost 119, roughly 10 miles away. This second pileup was even larger, about 30 vehicles, including SUVs, sedans, and multiple commercial trucks. Drivers who tried to brake found their tires gliding helplessly across polished ice. Others, blinded by whiteout conditions, plowed directly into the growing cluster of wrecked cars. Traffic on both sides of I-70 came to an immediate standstill. Families stepped out of stranded vehicles, stunned and shaking, some unable to see more than a few yards ahead. Semis idled on the shoulders. Hazard lights flickered through the snow like faint beacons. The canyon echoed with the distant rumble of yet another vehicle sliding into the chaos. Colorado State Patrol quickly issued a sobering assessment most drivers were traveling too fast for conditions, unaware of how quickly the storm would collapse visibility and freeze the pavement. Even well-equipped mountain vehicles, AWD SUVs, lifted pickups, studded tires lost control the moment the black ice took over. And yet, despite the scale, the violence, and the conditions, something astonishing happened. Not one person died. Troopers called it nothing short of a miracle, a blessing, a near miss on a scale rarely seen in winter driving. But while Colorado escaped tragedy by inches, this same storm system was already gaining strength, heading east toward Michigan, where the next highway would not be so fortunate. As the twin pileups brought both sides of Interstate 70 to a grinding halt, Glenwood Canyon transformed from a winter roadway into a crisis zone. Nearly 50 vehicles, cars, SUVs, pickups, and commercial trucks were scattered across the canyon floor like toppled dominoes half buried in snow, some teetering at odd angles, others crushed together so tightly that rescuers struggled to distinguish where one vehicle ended and another began. The storm showed no mercy. Heavy snow continued to fall, coating windshields, hood panels, and even the helmets of firefighters working frantically in the biting cold. Wind funneled between the canyon's steep rock walls, blasting icy powder horizontally across the scene, making every step slippery and every decision riskier. For the men and women responding to the disaster, the canyon felt less like a highway and more like a frozen battlefield. Colorado Department of Transportation immediately ordered a full shutdown of I-70 between exit 133 Cerro and exit 114 Glenwood Springs. Traffic in both directions came to a standstill for miles. Truckers idled on the shoulders. Families sat inside, warming their hands over dashboard heaters. Some drivers stepped outside into knee-deep drifts, staring in disbelief at the line of flashing emergency lights barely visible through the snow. Inside the canyon, first responders moved vehicle-to-vehicle checking for survivors, stabilizing the injured, and clearing paths through the wreckage. Tow trucks had to chain up just to enter the crash zone, inching forward on pavement, so slick it felt like polished glass. Snowplows followed tightly behind spreading sand and magnesium chloride in an attempt to carve out a safe surface where rescuers could work. One of the most urgent rescues involved Mark Henderson, a 42-year-old father from Denver. His SUV had been crushed between two commercial trucks, leaving him pinned inside, disoriented, and in excruciating pain. His two teenage children, though physically unharmed, stood by helplessly as firefighters cut open the vehicle. Snowflakes collected on Mark's jacket as medics worked quickly to stabilize his broken leg and prevent hypothermia from setting in. A firefighter at the scene later said it was like trying to work inside a freezer full of wrecked steel. Every minute mattered. Meanwhile, responders continued checking vehicles up and down the canyon, some with shattered glass, some with doors frozen shut, some nearly buried under snow that had fallen in the short time since the crashes began. Drivers shivered in the cold as they waited to be escorted to warming shelters staged near the exits. As daylight faded and the storm intensified, the canyon glowed with red and blue emergency lights reflecting off the swirling snow. Crews refused to leave until every car had been cleared and every occupant accounted for. Hours later, long after sunset, a single lane was finally reopened, but normal travel through Glenwood Canyon wouldn't resume until well into the night. Colorado had narrowly escaped a tragedy, but the storm that sparked this chaos was already traveling east toward Michigan, where the outcome would be far different. While Colorado's crash sites were still being cleared and emergency crews were catching their breath, A much more violent storm was already tearing across the Great Lakes. By Monday afternoon, southwest Michigan had fallen under the grip of a powerful lake-effect snow band, a weather phenomenon notorious for striking fast, hitting hard, and transforming safe roads into disaster zones with almost no warning. Interstate 94 near Hartford Exit 46 would become its next target. At 1:15 p.m., traffic was normal. Cars flowed steadily. Truckers cruised along their routes. Families were heading home from Thanksgiving travel. And then, in the span of seconds, everything changed. The horizon vanished. A wall of white crashed across I-94, plunging visibility from miles to near zero. Drivers described it as instant blindness, just a flash of swirling snow, then nothing but white. Beneath that collapsing curtain of snow lay a layer of black ice, thin and perfectly transparent. A trap no tire could grip. The disaster started with one vehicle. A passenger car moving too fast for the sudden conditions hit the ice, spun violently across the lanes, and slammed into the median. The driver behind never saw the crash, nor did the next, and the next. Within seconds, a semi-truck plowed into the wrecked vehicle, unable to brake on the slick pavement. Another semi slammed in from behind. Passenger cars piled on top of each other as momentum carried them into the growing mass of metal. It sounded, according to witnesses, like a thunderstorm made of steel. By the time the chain reaction was over, the main impact zone involved 14 passenger vehicles, 3 semi-trucks, plus 25 plus additional vehicles that slid off the road down embankments or into guardrails while attempting to avoid the crash. Some cars were crushed beneath trailers, others folded in half. A few were buried under drifting snow so quickly that responders had trouble locating them. Doors were jammed, windshields shattered. Engines hissed as they froze in the frigid air. Reaching the victims was its own battle. First responders, barely able to see more than a few feet in front of them, crawled along the shoulder, using flashers' voices and the sound of car horns to guide them through the storm. Medics knelt in snow up to their thighs, tending to injured drivers, while harsh winds stung their faces. Fire crews smashed windows, cut open doors, and dug through snowbanks that had formed inside the wrecked vehicles themselves. Then came the news no one wanted to hear. A 71-year-old truck driver from Burbank, Illinois, critically injured in the initial impact, died shortly after being transported from the scene. He became the first confirmed fatality of the storm system that had already caused chaos across half the country. Another driver was rushed to Spectrum Health in Grand Rapids in critical condition. Dozens more suffered broken bones, lacerations, chest trauma, or severe hypothermia. I-94 remained completely shut down for over 12 hours, reopening only around 4 a.m. Tuesday morning. For thousands of travelers stranded on Michigan's frozen interstate, it was a terrifying reminder of how quickly a normal afternoon commute can become a fight for survival. Colorado experienced a miracle. Michigan faced a tragedy. And the human stories inside the wreckage were only beginning to emerge. Amid the shredded metal flurries of snow and flashing emergency lights on Interstate 94, the true cost of the disaster was not measured in vehicle counts or highway closures. It was measured in the human stories, those moments of terror, bravery, and heartbreak that unfolded inside the mangled wreckage. And none was more gripping, more devastating, or more deeply human than the story of Jessica and Brian Lee. Jessica and Brian, both 28 years old and newly married, were returning home from a quiet weekend trip. Their small sedan, lightweight, efficient, but no match for a wall of semis, was caught in the worst possible place at the worst possible moment. When the initial whiteout hit, they slowed down, but the traffic behind them didn't. Their car was struck from the rear, launched forward, and forced violently beneath a flatbed trailer, crushing the front end and trapping them in a narrow pocket of twisted steel. Inside the wreck, the couple could barely move. Snow blew through broken glass. Metal pressed against their legs. The freezing wind cut through their coats. Jessica whispered to Brian that help was coming even though she wasn't sure she believed it. The storm was too loud. The crashes were too many. The world outside their shattered windows was nothing but white. It took first responders nearly an hour to reach them. Fire crews used the jaws of life carving open the car piece by piece. Sparks flew as metal groaned under hydraulic pressure. Paramedics knelt beside the wreck, speaking to the couple through small openings, anything to keep them conscious. Snowflakes collected on their eyelashes. Their hands trembled uncontrollably from a mix of cold and shock. Jessica suffered severe internal injuries and a broken femur. Brian endured major head trauma and spinal damage, slipping in and out of consciousness during the rescue. By the time they were freed, both were rushed to Spectrum Health in Grand Rapids, where surgeons worked for hours to stabilize them. Doctors placed them in induced comas, giving their bodies a chance to fight back. Their families launched a GoFundMe, and within hours donations flooded in from across Michigan. Neighbors, nurses, truck drivers, teachers, strangers who read their story and wanted to help two young newlyweds now facing the battle of their lives. But Jessica and Brian weren't the only ones whose lives were upended. Across both crash zones, Colorado and Michigan first responders encountered scenes of raw human emotion. Parents hugging children in the back seats of snow-filled cars, elderly drivers too shaken to speak. Travelers wandering the highway in disbelief, trying to understand how a normal drive had become a nightmare. People helping strangers climb out of vehicles buried in drifts. Tears mixed with falling snow as victims processed what they had survived. One firefighter later recalled, "What struck me wasn't the sound of the crashes. It was the silence afterward. People were in shock. You could see it in their eyes." These stories of survival, fear, resilience, and loss give weight to the numbers and statistics. They remind us that winter storms don't just shut down highways, they interrupt lives, they change futures, they leave scars both seen and unseen. For Jessica and Brian, for the families on I-94, and for the dozens rescued from I-70 recovery, will take time physically, emotionally, and financially. And as the winter storms continue to gather strength, their stories stand as a powerful warning for every driver on America's roads. The twin disasters in Colorado and Michigan were not freak accidents. They were the predictable outcome of a dangerous mix of meteorology, physics, and human behavior, an increasingly common combination as American winters grow more volatile. To understand how these pileups unfolded so quickly and with such force, we have to look at the hidden elements that turned two ordinary highways into disaster zones. The first culprit was the storm itself. Both I-70 and I-94 were struck by rapid-onset winter events, the kind that collapse visibility from miles to nothing in seconds. In Colorado, a powerful mountain snowburst slammed the canyon with swirling powder-cutting visibility to under 500 feet almost instantly. In Michigan, a lake-effect snow band fueled by cold air sweeping over warmer Great Lakes water created a blinding wall of white that drivers described as instant darkness in broad daylight. These whiteouts are among the most dangerous phenomena in winter driving because they give drivers zero reaction time. You can't slow down if you can't see the danger in front of you. The second culprit was black ice, the invisible killer of winter roads. Both states saw sudden temperature drops that froze moisture into a thin, transparent layer of ice on the pavement. Black ice doesn't look like ice, it looks like wet asphalt. But when a tire hits it, the laws of physics take over, steering becomes meaningless, braking becomes impossible, and momentum carries vehicle.
Okay, folks, from my experience in living in Canada, every winter you put 2 bags of salt in the trunk of car for the weight. You carry blankets, you carry flashlights, and you carry candles. For me living in Toronto for 7 years, You put 2 bags of salt in the trunk of the car for the weight. Keep the weight down. Keep blankets. You keep candles. You keep flashlights in care all the time, and some small snacks just in case. Folks, be safe out there for the winter. Much love, much love, much love.